So since it was on sale and I had a need for it, I went and bought a motor from Grizzly and a switch from them as well. 220 single phase 3400 or 3450 RPM motor. So here I'm trying to get things wired, and the problem is the cord I have is thick, so it doesn't fit into my little connectors very well. So I was fighting with that for a while, but I eventually got it figured out and then got it wired up into this one half of the switch, so that was good. And that should all be good. And then I started on the motor side and trying to figure that out and trying to get that wired, and that was again a little bit of a challenge, not too bad, a little bit of a challenge. I had to put the spade connectors on, and that worked. And then testing things, and that's all going good. And eventually, I made the mistake of checking continuity, and continuity didn't make sense because I'm not used to that. So I contacted the company, and they at least said that the wiring was correct. So ignore the continuity and just the wiring was right. And then I figured, okay, now that that's going, I don't know the length I need between the motor and the switch, so I just used the full length of cord that I had for setting this up. I may end up probably needing to shorten it later, but that should be fine. And then I got the other side in, and that took, again, it took a bit, but then it was going. Then I plugged it all in, screwed it down, clamped it down, pushed the button, and you can see stuff fly because it spun. And it worked correctly. Yay! We like it when things work. And then I took the board off to start seeing how the new motor will fit whereas the old one was. Now that the new motor and new switch work, I get to try and figure out how badly it's not going to fit on the cutter grinder. This motor is much smaller than the new one, and it looks like it's on a slide that's attached to the main frame, and then there's a motor mount and all that sort of fun stuff. So I need to get, well, one, this is filthy because it's, this is plywood, even though it looks painted. That's not painted. That's grease and oil and whatnot. So, and grit. So I need to take this part off and then see how the old motor's attached, and then see how that's going to work. I also don't think that I'm going to use the original stand, as that original stand is very, very top heavy with the motor on top, especially with nothing underneath, because it's very high, and it's a very narrow base, and it also wobbles, which is fun. I'm assuming since there's holes on the bottom, it either was bolted to the floor originally, which would make it very stable, which I can't do here, or it had wheels or something on that would make it even taller and messed up. But I'm also guessing they had something heavy on the bottom to weigh it down. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to use this. I might still try. If I do, I need to clean it completely because it's filthy. Again, cutter grinder, you don't worry about the oil and stuff as long as it's not on your parts, but it went all over the stand. So we'll see about that. But first I got to get this off. So to start, there were some square nuts underneath the plywood, and this is how I know it's just regular plywood because you can see it underneath. So I'll get those off. Those had cap head screws on both sides. Once I get that off, I should be able to see better how the motor is bolted onto that plate, and we'll go from there. I should have kept rolling. Not that there's anything super exciting, but you can see how many chips are just on the plywood. And you can also surprisingly see how many are up inside the base. I'm not even sure how that would get up in there because this was obviously clamped down solid on the plywood because you can see the ring of the machine. So I don't know where all those came from. I mean, that's sealed up in there, but there's still chips and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how they would have got. Oh, maybe. Ah, there's a hole right there. I'll bet that hole, if you do this way. Yep. Okay, now I know. There's another hole here. That's probably for the base, or an optional base piece. That's how they got in, I think. I guess. I'm not sure how it got down there. Yeah, I don't know. That may have gotten in by the cord. I'm not sure. But in any case, oh, there's another hole on this side. This hole would explain that pile of chips. I'm not sure where some of these others came from, but it makes more sense. There's holes from the outside that would have let chips in. So, okay. And now I'm taking the bolts out that hold the old motor on. Well, that came off pretty easily. I had to use because this is a European tool, I had to use a 10mm wrench, and I took out the little bolts for that plate. I knew the cord was bad, and you squeeze, the rubber cracks. Taking this off, it's also, the inner wires are cracked in the hard plastic. See, that's that's an important piece of something that was supposed to be in there. At best, I would have had to replace the cord up into the motor section, but since when you squeeze the cord, the rubber cracks, the whole cord needed replaced. I'm expecting to need to get a new belt, and I also need to take this all apart and clean it too before I get too far, because with the amount of dirt and grit that was in here, I'm sure it's, and you can see in other spots it needs a bit of TLC and care, and plus that way I can, if I clean it all up and check, like some of the people online have done with other videos, like Blondie Hacks took hers all apart and checked and cleaned and replaced bearings. Maybe the bearings are good. They seem to move and rotate fine whenever things are loose. Now I'm trying to get the pulley off. That did not work. Tried again, did not work. Try something else, still didn't work. I knew it was bigger. It's quite a bit bigger, so even jamming it clear against there, the belt barely fits around that, let alone going this large at that space. So if we were going to do it that big, the belt would have to come clear back to here, that wide. So I definitely need a bigger belt, which I knew. That was fine. The spacing on the motor, it fits on part of the plate, but the holes in the motor plate are too far back, and the back holes are completely off the plate. So that's not going to work as is. I will have to come up with something else, assuming I use that motor stand. The only reason I think that this was the motor was originally attached to that is that way this was all one unit. You could bolt it down or unbolt it, or it could even come shipped with the motor installed. That way you wouldn't have to play with the spacing, wouldn't have to play with the belt tension. It would just come that if it's attached in that spot, it's good. So I may have to take that post out and not use that, or maybe I'll keep it and just adjust and make a new plate. Don't know. I know it won't work like that. And I also cannot get the pulley off the old motor. We're done with this step. I just have to measure and then figure out how that's going to go. But at least I got this off. I did find the puller, and that worked just fine. So I'm so glad I got that. Crank it, came right up off. And here's just a picture of what the two motors lined up look like. You can see the sizing differences. And here's the one side of the pulley that I took off. You can see that it looks like a rounded bottom, probably because that's where the round belt fit down in. And interestingly, the other pulley, which I believe was supposed to be used for a dust collector, is a V. So I don't know if both were originally V's or not. I'll have to figure that out.